session today. And so Monica and I are going to be with you for around about 30 minutes will be the timing for this session. As always, everybody is in listen only mode, but please feel free to add comments, questions, reflections to the chat panel as we're working through the session. So we can't see you, you can only see Monica and myself. And the session will be recorded, so this will be appearing on our YouTube channel later this week. So if you want to watch it again, you'll be able to watch the recording again. So in terms of today's session, so this is a webinar on self-care, and you know, Monica and I both have been reflecting on our experiences as supervisors over recent months, and if not the whole of this year, I'd say, Monica, as well, but specifically our conversations over recent months. And just this sense in a lot of the coaches that we're working with around, you know, normally at this time of year, we feel tired, we feel physically tired, but there's a sense of, for a lot of people, actually feeling depleted from the work. And, you know, the old adage, you can't pour from an empty cup. So it was really the intent for us to run this session, was just a moment for you to pause at the end of the year and really consider this extremely important topic that you know, underpins the training that we give coaches, but I think is a really important aspect in terms of professional practice as well. So Monica, anything you'd like to add just before we move into the session?
Just, you know, that I'm aware more and more, particularly this year, that this has been not just a nice to have, but actually it's the whole area of self-care has been something that has been pivotal for people. And I'm beginning to think it should actually be a competency for coaches and supervisors.
I agree. So should we model a practice, Monica, just as a way of moving into this space?
Well, anybody who knows me will know that centering is, you know, creating space for yourself through your body and through your posture. And so I'm going to invite you just for a few minutes to, first of all, push away. If you're near a desk or a table, consciously make space for yourself just by moving away. And then move forward, shimmy forward on your seat so you get a nice stable base, because we all need some stability. And then leaving a long, slow exhale down into the earth. And if you can imagine, it's like a spiral. So just, I'll do it out loud and you can do whatever feels right to you. And that long, slow exhale actually drains cortisol out of the body, which is the stress chemical. And then just breathing upwards again, as if your breath is a spiral, because it means the brain gets interested in it. Just a normal breath. And then a long, slow exhale again. And one more breath upwards. And see if you can bring some uplift into your system, because we begin to shrink a little bit when we get stressed. So see if you can rise up, still keeping your head tucked down a little bit so that your head is balanced nicely. There's no effort involved in holding your head. And breathing up. And then just take a moment to connect in with yourself and bring to mind something or somebody that makes you smile. It could be a person, it could be an animal, it could be something funny that you thought about, or maybe even appreciation for yourself. And as you do that, just notice what happens in your heart. See if you can sense some warmth coming in, maybe even an inner smile that relaxes all of your organs. And then another long, slow exhale. And then just become aware of the space that you occupy, because again, when we're under pressure, everything begins to squeeze. So see if, just like a plant that's been watered, you can extend yourself fully into the space and uplift, allowing energy to flow freely through your body. Just get the sense, what if I was fully present? if I could allow myself to fully take up my space. And then invite in a quality of energy that you'd like to cultivate. Might be just 2% of something, like openness, generosity, ease. Your body will know what you need. And it's not a have to. It's just, what if I could do this for me? And as you do that, I'm going to invite you to connect in with what's really important to you today. What brought you here? You know, your head might have something to say about self-care. Your heart might have something else to say. And what is your gut niggling at you to do for your own self-care? And maybe what's a question that you're holding that you'd like to have answered in this space? So now I'm going to invite you to type your questions that you'd like some response to into the chat. And Damion and myself will do our best to engage with them all during this session. So as you come out of this space of center, what is your question for today? And we look forward to reading them in the chat. Nice question, Virginia.
And if you choose panelists and attendees, it just means everyone can read the questions.
How do you sustain resilience over longer periods? Lovely. What's self-care and what's procrastinating? Identifying the need for increased self-care. Thanks, Catherine.
And please keep the questions coming through and reflections as we're working through this. But I suppose, Monica, should we move into a bit of the why?
Absolutely, yeah. Why are we doing this? So I'm just going to read this and leave it sort of wash over you as I read it. It comes from Otto Scharmer, the founder of Theory U. This is the moment when what we need most is enough people with the skill, heart, and wisdom to help us pull ourselves back from the edge of breakdown and onto a different path. So just let that land with you for a moment. So Damion mentioned at the beginning that we reflect a lot on self-care and the importance of self-care for ourselves as supervisors and coaches and for all those we work with. And we've recognized, we've run different webinars, but also retreats over time. When people come along, sometimes there's a sort of, it's almost like, the question that came up there around self-care and procrastination, but it's almost like a permission is needed sometimes to take time for self. And we recognize more and more that it's something that actually is an act of, it's an ethical act. It's an act of extreme self-care, not just for ourselves, but actually it supports our clients. If we are in a good place, we're holding a kind of space that they come into that's different to what they would normally be experiencing. They come into a place of resourcing because we are resourced. Would you like to add anything to that, Damion?
I agree, and if we think about the current context, the end of the year, the busyness, COVID, Brexit, multiple impacts that we've had this year. There's that sense of, if the coachee is in that sort of fight or flight response, as they come into the coaching session, if we're not, if we don't have a practice, and I'll call this a practice of self-care, there's a sense of, we necessarily would be contaminating each other, that sense of, rather than, as you're saying, that resourcing, that place of regulating the coachee into a place where they can start to be fully present for the conversation.
And what you mentioned there about a practice, I mean, some of the questions have been around, how will I know that I need self-care, or how do I identify it in the moment? It's a bit like with presence, we ask ourselves, are we present? And the minute we ask, we probably aren't present. So it's almost like assume that you need it before you need it, and have something that resources you, I would say, on a daily basis, something that before sessions and after sessions that you begin to build in for yourself, that resources you. So your body is actually always being resourced, and you bring that with you. I'm just reading another question that came in from Lucila, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm suffering from terrible pain in my right arm due to excess typing and use of devices. I feel that every evening. I take time to consciously relax the aching muscle, but every morning I feed it pain. How could I stop this vicious circle? And so what you're referring to there is a physical sort of depletion, a physical pain. And sometimes, we need to really be aware of what our capacity is, and to recognize that sometimes we actually need to take downtime. If something is recurring, then we need to step out of the river for a while and take care of whatever it is. Sometimes that's not always practical when you're in a busy period, but to build in pockets of self-care, of actually taking time out to do what's needed. It might be massage, it might be something, doctor visit, whatever is required. Back to you, Damion.
Thanks, Monica. Well, and I think, I think my only encouragement sometimes when we're noticing this, it's a physical pain, it's also about our relationship to that physical pain. Are we just moving into that place of toughness and trying to push on through, or are we being more conscious around what we really need? Because again, a lot of this is us modeling for our clients, and the realities are, some of the time we have to push on through, but that sort of sense of, I suppose, being conscious of our is it a reactivity, an unconscious reactivity, or are we actually conscious of how we're relating to this as well? So Monica, I think it leads quite nicely, just thinking about this context, onto this map that we often reflect on.
I find this a very powerful model, and in fact it was interesting, I had a supervision session this morning with somebody and we spoke about this, because You know, here we have the supervisor who's holding a space for the supervisee, who's holding a space for their client, and ultimately the client system. And in terms of self-care, how I show up and how I model my own self-care, which sometimes can be things like, for example, not working at lunchtime, or, you know, if I say that I take a certain amount of holidays, whatever self-care means, either on a macro level or in the granular micro level of a session, that I'm modeling something for my supervisee, who then models that for their client. And this morning, this supervisee shared with me that she had noticed a real shift in one of her clients. And I asked her to reflect on that and what did she notice. And she came back to this model that she felt I had modeled for her, and she was able to bring that into her client system. And so, who are we when we show up in a session? How resourced are we? How are we looking after ourselves? And you know, sometimes the client system may feel like it's affecting our supervisee or our client. And actually, for the person who can change it is either me as the supervisor, or sometimes it's the coach who can change the dance by modeling something very powerful in terms of self-care. So where at the moment, I had another supervision session a week ago with somebody who's working in an organization that serves other organizations. They have a coaching group of coaches who go into organizations, and the organizations aren't really interested in self-care, or don't appear to be. So how she enters into that organization is really important, and how she's held by her own organization. Jamie, anything you'd like to add to that?
I just think as well, it's just what's in the field. You know, I mentioned earlier, you know, so actually I'm meeting these conditions in my coachees, their organizations, the wider system. There's so much, you know, that we're holding at the moment. And, you know, this idea of it being a practice rather than this is just something I turn to when I feel depleted, you know. I think it's natural, as I said at the start of this, to feel tired this time of year. But, you know, if I have a practice, there's a sense of I can be sort of nourishing and resourcing myself. And it doesn't have to be major things, you know. And I think that's why helping a coaching client really work through this as well. They don't need to be big things. They're just, you know, they can be small things throughout the day. And I think especially when we're under pressure, it's more important that they're being more consciously held.
Absolutely. So will we move on to the next piece, Jamie?
Yeah, I think so, because I'm conscious of time, Monica, as well. And I know this is quite a familiar sort of a phrase that's used a lot. This quote from Viktor Frankl. He wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, and just this sort of sense. And I'll mention the quote in a moment, but again, often at this time of year, we're so busy, you know, because of the end of the year, because of everything that we're holding. And as a coach, it can be quite easy in a coaching session to lose connection if we're not practicing self-care. So, you know, because of the busyness in our clients, it's quite it happens quite a lot that we actually forget ourselves in the coaching session, you know, and we're not grounding ourselves, and we're not presencing ourselves, and that's what we lose connection with. So actually, when stuff is coming up for the coachee, it becomes more about us, and we start to make more connections with ourselves than actually when we are feeling resourced. So without this practice, there's not this much space actually in terms of the difference between stimulus and response, as the quote says. You know, I had another quote the other day which I really liked, which was the demon of speed is often associated with forgetting. And what are we forgetting? We're forgetting ourselves, and that sort of sense of connection with ourselves as we're working as coaches. Because in these moments when, you know, we're listening to the coachee and we're making sense of, you know, their story, and we're tuning into ourselves, you know, we're noticing what's there, and that's informing whether we make an intervention. That could be a question or a technique. We might be mirroring what we're noticing in the coaching client, or we might be modeling and sharing our own process. And again, if we're not taking care of ourselves and the space isn't present, there won't be the awareness there. There won't be the ability to really tune into our intention and what's driving what's next in the coaching session. So this self-care practice is also really what supports us in the session itself, as well as obviously taking care of ourselves, which self-care often gets spoken about. So again, Monica, I want to build on this in a moment, but anything you want to add to that?
One of the things that, at the beginning of the session, your own self-care, for example, centering at the beginning of the session with the client, can serve both. It can serve yourself and the client to come into the space together. So it's not indulgence. It's actually an act of supporting the person to really use the space well. And they may have rushed from somewhere else to your session. So it will be part of your practice, and it will also become part of their practice. They learn to stop and take a moment before they jump into something. So you're actually training them as well.
Thanks, Monica. We're going to do something practical in a moment, but I just wanted to mention this because people on the webinar that are training with us or have trained with us, we talk about transformational coaching as creating an energetic embodied shift in the coachee during the coaching session. And that is a result of our capacity to help the coachee slow down in the session. And what we mean by slowing down is so they can start to slow their process down and actually start to recognize the habits, the patterns, the beliefs, the values that are all at play with whatever that's being discussed. And so as a coach, I'm attuning to the coachees, I'm listening to them. The word listen, if you play with the letters, it also means let's in. And if we think about what we're letting in terms of tuning, where the coachee feels felt, we're feeling the feelings of the coachee. And we know from social neuroscience we do this in terms of we're socially connected. So there's something in here around, we really need to be conscious of this, and recovery time is such an important aspect of having a strong professional practice. And especially in times such as these where we're working online, it's close to Christmas, we're trying to fit in the coachee at the last minute because they're keen to see us again. There's a sense of, sometimes we're letting go of some of what we need. So I hope this conversation is really helping you reflect on what you need to be at your best as well, because especially at the moment, often we can be letting go of some of that. So I just want to give you a couple of things to reflect on, and one is just I want you to draw these 3 circles actually. So first let's start with the top 2. You have a circle for your life, you've got a circle for your coaching practice and your wider career. If you do coaching as part of your role. So how big are those circles at the moment in terms of the percentage of time they're taking up for you? And then this circle that we're talking about here, how big is your circle of self-care? How big is your circle of self-care? And just go with your gut instincts. No one else is going to see this, so just draw it for you at the moment. And if we were coaches, we could even get you to think about how big you want those circles to be and when by. But what I'm going to invite you to do is just for a moment, just pause and think about your relationship with self-care and what it really means to you. Because as I said earlier, it doesn't need to be big periods of time. For a lot of my coaching clients I supervise, they think it's, they need to be doing something for an hour a day or different things. Actually, it's little moments that accumulate during the day. And it's what we pay attention to that can really support the self-care. But I suppose mostly for Monica and myself, it's an encouragement to think about how you can enjoy your self-care. Give yourself permission to enjoy this, because otherwise it becomes a chore. This is something I have to do as a coach to help me be present and help me be at my best with clients. And then there's a lot of reactivity that comes with that sense of chore. So how could you enjoy this? Next year, even over Christmas, how can you really enjoy your self-care? Give yourself permission to do that wholeheartedly, and just be interested and curious about what the impact is when we approach our self-care in that way. So
Joseph Campbell saying, follow your bliss, it doesn't have
yeah,
to be a big, huge thing. It could be 5 minutes of standing outside, breathing in the air, so something that's simple, but that nourishes you.
Thanks, Monica. So Monica and I ran another session called Keeping Fit for Purpose, when we shared a wheel of self-care that we developed. I'm just going to bring that up on the screen, Monica, for you.
Lovely. So if you look at this wheel, these are, I suppose it's taking you from the macro to the micro level. If you look at the different elements there and just see which ones jump out at you as maybe something that you could begin to pay attention to, even if it was only 1%, if we do something over time regularly and it's even a small amount, it actually has a huge response in compound interest. So if you were to take one thing in one of those sections, looking at nutrition, hydration, if you had more water, if you paid more attention to what you take in terms of food, and not just, moving away from all the bad stuff, but just one tiny change that would increase your energy, or something for your physical health. So just take a moment and see which of those speaks to you. And if you like, you can put it in the chat if that feels right too. Or for yourself, just to take note. What could I do 1% more of in one of those areas? And what difference would it make to me? What if you had a little bit more inspiration? And by the way, the posse means it's like having a council of support behind you. It could be an archetype that you take in, or somebody that you admire. If you imagined having a bit of Damion in your posse, or a bit of Nelson Mandela, what would they do, or how would they support you? How would they inspire you? The idea is really to begin to do something different. And the difference between indulgence or procrastination and self-care is actually procrastination is something that's not conscious. Self-care is a conscious act. It's something that you choose to do, and you choose to do every day or as regularly as you can, in service to you and to your work. So just notice what jumps out at you. Back to you, Damion, if there's anything you'd like to add.
No, and I think as always, there might be other areas that come up for you. So I noticed a moment ago, Virginia shared about creativity. And so, some of these you might change.
Absolutely.
So just permission to do that. It's just a way of starting to really think about how we can be more conscious of this.
What raises your energy?
So, this is about us keeping fit for purpose. So as I said earlier, there's another webinar we recorded on this, but this is also about us being at our best as coaches in the session and in our wider life, actually. So we really wanted to end with this quote from O Sensei, which is the founder of Aikido. So I'll just give you a moment to read that. Because, for a lot of people, they look to self-care when they notice something's wrong. Often this time of year, or it may just be before the summer break, we start to notice and wanting to pay attention to our self-care. Monica, I'll speak for you as well, but, in our practice, And when we train coaches, there's a continuous encouragement to pay attention to this consistently. You know, this isn't something that we do when we need to recover. Actually, the more I do this, the more able I am to recover. And let's think about that piece of being less reactive and more responsive as a coach in my practice and my wider life. Anything you want to add to that, Monica? Just that final reflection.
I think it's a little bit like what our sensei is saying. You know, none of us is perfect. None of us can be centered all the time, present all the time, in self-care all the time. But it's our attention, our conscious commitment to it, our conscious daily recognition that even if we do something small in that direction, we are actually tipping the balance. And not only for ourselves, but for those that we hold space for. And they feel the difference. I can guarantee that they will know the quality of the space when you have a practice for yourself and when you're looking after yourself.
So we're at time. So I really hope this has been a useful reflection for you at this point in the year. We are running another session tomorrow. So tomorrow at 2 o'clock UK time, Liz Palmer, my business partner, and myself are going to be running a session to help you reflect on your coaching practice at the end of 2020. So I do hope you can join for that session as well. But just really go well in the meantime, keep well, and remember to put your own oxygen mask on before you're helping others with theirs.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Fill your own cup. Look after yourselves. And yeah, one small thing, 1%.